Well, hello and welcome to today's webcast. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software. I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, our lead solution engineer here at Alpha. We're going to be going through today's Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A. And it's been a couple weeks since we've had one, so we are happy to be back. Before we get started, a couple things you should know. First of all, this is a Q&A session, so please, by all means, type your questions in now into the questions box of the GoToWebinar interface. The second thing is that this session, like our other sessions, is being recorded, and you can find those recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. So let's begin. Hello, Dion. Are you there?
Yes, indeed. Welcome. Good to hear everybody back in the saddle.
Fantastic. Welcome back. Did you have a good vacation?
Yes, it was wonderful. Spring break with I have two little girls, and we had a fabulous time. Really had a good chance to catch up and just play and do silly stuff, and ready to be back in the mix. Really, it's been busy this week. Things are really hopping out there.
That's great. Well, I can see your screen, and everything's going through. So
Excellent.
Let's get started.
Okay, so today I've got, we had some great questions come in from this week, which we want to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to send your questions in. We'll cover those questions first after I do a little presentation here. And then also, of course, we're here for you, so make sure to enter your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel. Dave will be monitoring them through this situation, or through our presentation today, and be lining them up, and then we can try and do our best to answer them. If we can't answer them, we'll come back either after the seminar or next week with the answers we can find. Again, my name is Dion McCormick with Alpha Anywhere, a lead solutions engineer. Just wanted to go ahead and start by first letting everybody know coming up is something very exciting. Alpha DevCon 2016. The date has been set, the location has been set. It is time to register. So again, it's September 21st through the 23rd in Danvers, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. A really phenomenal facility. It's going to be wonderful. The pricing is actually very good. I've gone ahead and locked in my hotel room, and Alpha has negotiated a great deal, so you can be there on site. And this is the web page for that. It's alphasoftware.com/devcon2016. And I highly recommend you sign up early. We had a packed house last year and basically sold out, and we anticipate we'll have that even more. In fact, I was just doing some training with someone a couple of weeks, and they have a couple of people coming in. I mean, the interest level is so high. And it's such a great event. Not only do you learn all the new stuff coming down the road, but also more importantly is you make great connections with other developers who can help you out, who can be supportive in other pieces. So you go to alphasoftware.com, DevCon 2016, just click on the register now. You can find more information on this page, including a quick video from the previous one. Here's some information about the location at the DoubleTree by Hilton. Again, great deal. And we've got the different 3-day pass, plus we're doing a pre-conference training day on Tuesday, September 20th. And so what's really cool about that, we haven't opened the registration on that, but that will be a pre-training day, which you can focus on boning up on some of the your existing skill sets, but also on some of the new skill sets. We'll be introducing and doing some training around that. So make sure to go there, sign up, get your place for sure. And again, I would also see about reserving your hotel room so that you get the great rate that Alpha has negotiated. But it's going to be another fun, fabulous DevCon. September, you'd be surprised, is just around the corner, man. I can't believe we're almost to summer. It's this year is just moving along very quickly. So Alpha DevCon 2016, we look forward to seeing everybody there. Great. So with that, what I'd like to do is we had a very interesting question from a listener, reader, viewer, whatever you want to call, but one of our great development people out there. And the question regarded encryption. They have a situation where they are storing Social Security numbers as part of their application. It's a requirement of their application. And what they want to be able to do is encrypt that information and store it in the database. And in this case, the individuals were using MySQL as the database. Now, if you're using SQL Server and you have some money, SQL Server actually has built-in encryption capability. So again, if you're a SQL Server person using the SQL Server license versus like the Express Edition, the full-blown one has built-in encryption that you might be able to take advantage of there. So Jell will check out. But for someone who wants to go ahead and essentially roll their own encryption, I've got some just some pointers on how we do that. And in fact, Alpha, with its desktop legacy, actually has a lot of encryption capability. In fact, our web security, our Alpha web security framework is HIPAA compliant, which is the compliance for the healthcare industry, very tight, very conscious, and we've done a lot of great work on security there. But I want to kind of point the user in the right direction. So basically there are 20 different encryption functions available within Alpha. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we have 20 different ones. You can encrypt whole tables if you're using DBFs and other pieces there. But there are 2 specific encryption functions that I'd like to cover today. And they are encrypt string and decrypt string. And these are kind of 2 peas in a pod. They're used kind of together. So the idea here, and the question was, well, if, okay, I'm going to save this data to a database, how do I encrypt it in the database? What you will do is, and I will show this in a minute, you'll use these encryption strings when you read the data, and then you will use that information when you write the data to the database. And so you'll have to do, or you'll have that capability. So let's first walk through the encryption functions just so you have a feel for how they work. So let's start with encrypt string. And as it sounds, it basically takes a character string and runs a algorithm and encrypts it. Now, there's 2 methods you can do it. First one, which I hope you can see okay, it's basically the command, open parentheses, and then the text you'd like to encrypt. This is going to use the primary encryption key, and it will just automatically encrypt that into a encrypted string. But you can use your own password when you do the encryption, thus giving it a higher level of security. Basically, you control that password. So what you do is you pass in the string, and then you pass in a password that you would like to use, and it can be any character string password, and then it will perform the encryption. And then out of that function comes your encrypted string, which you can then use it. Now, that's all fine and dandy. You've encrypted the string. How do we decrypt it? Well, very straightforward. You have a decrypt string. Actually, let me fix this. Dun, dun. Is basically you pass it the encrypted string, and it will generate the readable decrypted string as the result of this function. And again, similar to when we encrypted it, you can pass it a string and a password, and it will use that password. So the idea is, obviously, if you don't use a password to decrypt it, don't use one to, or if you don't use a password to encrypt it, don't use it to decrypt it. But if you use a password to encrypt it, excuse me, make sure to use that same password to decrypt it, otherwise you won't get the result you're looking for. So basically you have these 2 functions that can work in conjunction to encrypt and decrypt. So that begets the question. Okay, great. So let's say I have a UX control and I want to encrypt that information before I save it to the database. And then similarly, when I read that record back out of the database in a UX control to display it on, say, a form, how do I decrypt that so that I can use it in a user-presentable format? And there's actually 2 ways to do this. If the information is super secure, and I'm going to go ahead and pop over now to my development environment. So Dave, just process check, make sure that everything is coming through okay.
Yep.
But I'm going to go ahead and, good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up, I'm in my Alpha development system for people who are new to it. I'm in the Web Projects Control Panel. I'm going to click New. I'm going to create a web component, and I'm going to set up a UX right here. Okay. So nothing super exciting. It's just a blank UX form. And in here, I can add my information like name, address, social security number. Okay, so this would be my form, and I would use data binding to bind this form to the database, which would include that field, say, social security number that is located in the field. Now, there's kind of two methodologies you can go. One is you can do automatic encryption decryption, or actually, automatic encryption decryption, i.e. that when this form is displayed, it always shows you the unencrypted social security number, which is what most people do. Now, other people, what you can do is you can actually present the social security screen as say the encrypted function, but then what you could do is have a button on the screen, and I can say show SSN, and then let's say I put a label button right after it. We'll go SSN show. And what you could do is you could click this button right here, run a AJAX callback to the server, decrypt the screen, and show it right here. But that's kind of, a little bit, that's for super security, like if you never ever want to show a social security number on the screen unless someone physically hits a button. That's one way to do it. Most of the time what you'll do is you will, when you save the information, you will encrypt the string, and when you restore it, you will decrypt it and show it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that real quick. So let's take the first example. Let's say I've data bound this to the database. So each one of these fields is data bound to a field in the database. Well, when I save, I'm going to go ahead and put my other controls, which are my, let's see, where is it? Submit reset. So when I click the submit button, it's going to now call a server-side event called after dialog initialize, which will then save the data. And show how I do that is I go to server side, I go to after dialog validate. Again, I'll come back to this in a moment. On dialog initialize, this is where we're going to grab the data and decrypt it. In the after dialog validate, this is where I'm going to process the data before I save it to the database. So the first thing I'm going to do is the following, and follow along. It's a little code in here, but it's not too hard. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create SSN encrypted as C. So I've defined a variable called SSN encrypted, which will hold my encrypted social security number. Now what I can do is go SSN encrypted is equal to string encrypt, or encrypt string, and then I'll go ahead and say e.data submitted dot SSN. Okay. So what I've done is this. I created a variable to hold my encrypted string. Then what I did is I went ahead and ran a little function that took the value of whatever was in the social security number, and then I encrypted it. And I could have put in here a password so that I have it even more secure, whatever you want to do, put in from that standpoint there. But the important thing is after this runs, I now have an encrypted string that looks like gobbledygook. So instead of seeing the person's social security number, they're going to see what looks like a random set of numbers, strings, variables, etc. that they can't see. Okay. Now what we want to do, and this is super important, and this is critical, is that what I want to do now is I'm going to say e.data submitted.ssn is equal to SSN encrypted. Okay, so what I did is I took the unencrypted social security number, comma there, I encrypted it into this value, and then I re-put it back in that e.data submitted because I would like the system to go ahead and take care of saving it for me. And thus, now what I do is I can do a save submitted data to the table. Oh, I didn't do the data binding, but you would have your normal e.data submitted kind of scenario. In fact, so with that in mind, I have to do one other thing. So in here will be the action JavaScript, and this will be built automatically for you if you use the method to auto-generate the fields in there. But I can go action JavaScript save here. But there's actually one important thing I need to do, and this is very important. I've gone ahead and encrypted and I've set my e.data submitted to be social security number. Now what will happen if the user didn't change that social security number? Well, it's still going to grab the information and encrypt it, But the only thing I want to do is make sure that every time I do this, I automatically save that information to the server. So what I need to do is I use a quick little technique, and the code's right down here, and this is a very important one to know, is that the system's only going to save fields that have been changed by the user when they're using the UX. But if you want to do this kind of post manipulation, you actually have to set the person, oops, I'm sorry. You have to actually tell it which fields you want it to save. So this is what's going on here. So what I've done is I have manually or programmatically changed what I want to store in the database. But the reality is if the user had not modified that social security number, because I always want to encrypt it before I save it to the database, but if they haven't modified that social security number, then it's not going to save the information properly. So what I need to do is I need to say eDirtyColumns is equal to eDirtyColumns plus the name of the field I would like it to save. And thus when it runs the action JavaScript to save the data into the database, it will automatically make sure to also include this edate.datasubmitted.social security number. So that's the important thing that's going on there. So I encrypt the data, so the user is going to see the social security number, however it is. When they click OK to submit this, on the server side, it's going to go ahead and encrypt that data, update the field to use the encrypted data, and then I want to set the dirty column to say, yeah, I've changed that social security number, and then we'll use the regular action JavaScript to do that. And in fact, let me do this real quick. I'm going to bind this to a table. So I'm just going to do this real quick so that you can see exactly what's going on here. So I'm going to go to my connection here. I'm going to add my table, which I'm just going to do customers. I wonder if employees have serial numbers. I'm not sure. Okay. So now that I've done that, I can go to my after server-side event here, and I'm going to add in my save submitted data to table, and I'm going to stay on that at the record just submitted and click OK. So what's going to happen is that after I've encrypted the data, updated it, said it's dirty, then the alpha system itself will go ahead and save that encrypted social security number to the database for me, so that now inside the database is that encrypted version of the social security number, not the decrypted version, which people can see. Now that handles one half of it, which is how do I take the data on the screen, encrypt it, and then save it into the database properly. But we have a second issue. Well, when I load up...
Uh-oh, Dan, are you still there? Hello, Dion. I think we lost you there for a minute.
Yeah, I'm plugging in my headset again here. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, headset problem. Must have gotten too excited. To back up a moment, am I still coming through okay?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. So I have the method now that I encrypted and stored into the database, but if I were to say, okay, data bind that field to that database record, when the user saw that social security number when I loaded this record, well, you're going to have a problem, which is the issue is you're going to see the encrypted version of the social security number. So what we need to do is when we load the data in from the database, we need to actually take a moment and decrypt that data so the user can see it in an unencrypted fashion. And this is how we do it. So the first thing we're going to do is when the UX loads and grabs that information, I keep standing on it, there we go. Can you hear me okay still?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. What it is that there's a little switch on here I keep sitting on. Okay, so the onDialog initialize will occur, and in there we're going to say populate data from one or more tables. So this is what's going to run to load up my data in here. Okay, so normally what happens is when this dialog opens up, it runs this server-side action where it populates the data from the table given the unique ID that's been passed into this UX. So it does that automatically, and then what it does is that it inserts the value in each one of these fields of what that information is, and then boom, when I submit it, it will follow the rest of the process. But what I need to do is, after I do this, I need to update that social security number with an unencrypted version. So there's a cool little feature. When I run this execute server-side action populate dialog from tables, and I'm going to edit that right now, there's a cool little feature saying capture raw data. And if you look down here, it has complete information. But what this basically does is say, after I do this, I'm going to give you a little object which has all the data that I've collected so you can manipulate it. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to accept the dot variable name called _data. Okay, so again, all I'm doing here is it says it's going to take care of population UX, putting in the data in the right fields, etc., whatever I have there. But what I also wanted to do is say, hey, give me a variable with all the information you just returned. So we can go in here. We can now say e.control.ssn is equal to _data.ssn. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say decrypt string. And since I used a password, I'm going to use a password to decrypt it. Okay. So there it is. This is what's going on. When this runs, it's going to grab the data from the database. It's going to automatically get the UX ready to go by populating all the text boxes, etc. At the same time, since I have clicked this button called Capture Raw Data, it is going to put into this _data, which is a pointer variable, meaning it's going to have all the different data columns basically from that table in it. So basically it's going to allow me to say, okay, go ahead and grab the social security number that I just retrieved from the database, decrypt it, and then set the e.control.social security number equal to that. And this format right here, e.control.that, just says put this value into the text box called SSN. So that's my round trip. Every time I load here, it's going to assume the data that is in the database is encrypted. It's going to allow me to grab that, decrypt it, put it into that control, and then when the person submits, I can then encrypt it, reset that field to be that encrypted version, set the dirty column so that I make sure that the system will save it, and then the system will execute the server-side action to go ahead and save that. So a couple of different, we kind of covered a couple of different things on here. First is we've got two primary, and so let me walk through them very quickly. We've got two primary encryption functions, encrypt string, decrypt string. They're used in conjunction with each other. They can handle it without or with a password. Highly recommend you set your passwords and use that. And that way, and again, this is what it generates off of a normal string. We walked through that, great, so we know how to encrypt it, but when do we do that when we're actually using a UX control? What we do is when we save it, we encrypt it, reset that field to be that encrypted version, set the dirty column so the system knows to save it, and then have the system save it to the database for me. It writes all the CRUD code. And then when we initialize, we're using a trick where we grab the data from the database, we have set the parameter for capture raw data to be true, we have _data here, and then we can then grab that value and then do a decryption of that using the same password I used before and set that control to be that, and boom, you now have the full round trip of the data stored in the database in encrypted fashion. It is then retrieved, decrypted, and shown to the user. They can modify it, edit it as normal text. Whenever it's saved, it then automatically goes through the encryption process again and stores it in the database. So if you looked at it in the database, you would see gobbledygook. And Alpha uses this same methodology. If you were to ever go into our web security users folder, I'm actually now in Navicat looking at one of my sample solutions. This is one of our standard tables. Check out and look at what the password looks like. Kind of gobbledygook. Well, what's happening is Alpha is doing the same thing, is that when you create a new user with their user ID and password, Alpha is encrypting that password and storing it into the database, and then when it goes to search that, it will pull it back in, decrypt it, do a compare with the thing that's entered. So we use the same methodology. I mean, these encryption functions are used built into Alpha, so they're very well identified, very well worked out, and very reliable. This just allows you to do that for yourself to allow you to decrypt or encrypt and decrypt things on an ongoing basis. So that was question number one. I know it took a little bit longer. We're at 24 after the hour, but I hope that answers the individual's questions in terms of how to using encrypting and decrypting. Again, these are great functions. There's 20 other functions that are in there, and what we find is that very powerful in this day and age, especially with the requirements of protecting people's personal information. By the way, some people want to store credit cards. I highly recommend against that, even if you can encrypt it and decrypt it, primarily because the payment gateways now allow you to submit that information to them, and then they give you a unique token that you can save and then use that whenever you need to then process a credit card transaction. So you're never actually holding the credit card data on your system. You're basically passing it over to a payment processor. They give you a token that you can then use for future transactions, and that saves you a lot of it reduces your liability because they're the ones that have encrypted and saved all the credit card data on your behalf, and so it makes it a lot of security. But if you do need to do that for your own personal requirements, obviously this is a great methodology to do that. So go ahead, if you have questions, follow-up questions, go ahead and put that into the questions area. I'm going to jump to another subject that another individual, and this should only take about 5 minutes to discuss. Another individual gave us an email, and they asked, they've created specific JavaScript libraries that are JavaScript functions that they would like to use within their application. So they're saying, what are the strategies to use these JavaScript functions within the tool? So let me go into here. And I'm going to go ahead and open up a file that they sent me, and hope they don't mind. It's an interesting little thing. Let's go Dropbox here. There we go. It's the JavaScript function. Okay. So they've created a function here called calculate duration. It basically takes 2 dates. You submit it in 2 dates, and then it does a calculation of duration between dates and returns that date. Nice little function. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. So there's a couple ways you can handle that. First, if you're just going to use that on a specific UX, let's say in this particular situation, on this one, you can go down here to JavaScript functions, and you can just add that right into the JavaScript functions. And this JavaScript then now becomes part of this UX that I just built, and therefore I can then call this function while I'm on this UX. Now, the important thing to realize is that this function essentially lives only when this UX is available on the client machine. And remember, JavaScript is client-focused, meaning that it's on the web browser or mobile device. And so it has to kind of be delivered to the mobile device. So in this situation, what we're doing is we're actually embedding this function on this UX. And so when this UX gets served to the web browser or to the mobile device, it actually carries that function and then submits it down with it. Similar to if I included XBasic functions for this. Now, excuse me, let's say I have a situation where I actually want to use this on multiple UXs. So let's say in my functionality, I need to use it on this UX and another UX and another UX and other places. Well, it's a pain to have to copy this into every UX. That would be kind of a trouble, especially if you ever had to go in and change it. You'd have to go down and track every UX that you attached this function to and did not function, or excuse me, you would have to track it down and then modify it in every UX. Not very efficient. So there's a better way to handle that, is that I can basically go in here and take this function. So I'm going to copy, or I'm going to go ahead and cut this function out. I'm going to go to my Web Projects control panel. I'm going to go over here to where it says JavaScript files. Okay, so JavaScript files, I can then create a new JavaScript file. So I'm going to go a little slower. I'm going a little fast. I'm in my development environment. I'm at the Web Projects control panel. On the left are the different types of things that are in my system. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click JavaScript files. So it will show I actually have a JavaScript files in here, but at the root here I don't have any JavaScript files. So I'm going to create a new one here, and I'm going to call it JavaScript library. I'm going to select it of type JavaScript file, and I'm going to paste that function in here, and I'm going to save that function, and I'm going to call this my.js library. Okay, so what I did is now I have a library, basically a text file, with my JavaScript in here, and I can put as many functions as I wanted in there as I needed to. And in fact, if you're using third-party JavaScript libraries, you can copy those into here and use them in the system and expose them to the rest of the system. So now that I've centralized my functions into one location, the question is, well, then how can I get access to that? Does it automatically get access to it when I'm on this UX? And let's go encrypt, decrypt. Okay, so the answer is no. If I were to go in here and use this JavaScript, it really wouldn't be aware of it. What I need to do is one more thing. I go to properties of my UX, then I go down to JavaScript linked files, okay? So I use the properties here to find it very quickly, but it's down here under JavaScript. It's called JavaScript linked files. And in here, I can then type in that my.js library library, okay? So you'll notice I just typed the name of my library in here. So I created a library called my JavaScript library. It now lives at the root directory, and my function is in there. I go to JavaScript link files, I type in that name of that library. If I have multiple ones, I can put in multiple 2, library 3, etc. I could put multiple ones in there. Now once I've done that, the system, when this UX is deployed to the mobile solution, it automatically brings along this library so that then I can then use that on this JavaScript. I can use that JavaScript on this UX. So any of the UXs that are going to use any of my library functions, all I have to do is put in here that name of that library, and now all those functions that are located in this library and this file are available in this UX. So I just add that to each UX. Now, you don't have to keep this here. So if I wanted to, I could create a subfolder like, say, JavaScript, and put the library here if you want for organization purposes. In that case, the only thing you have to do is make sure, as you notice in here, you have to say, for instance, JavaScript / So you have to give it the full path name to where it will find that library. So if it's at the root, it's just the library name itself, just this right here. If you put it into a subfolder, let's say you're consolidating all your JavaScript into one subfolder, you just have to put in the path, and it shows you an example right here of what that may be. In this case, this is mine here. And that's all there is to it. And so that really is the best way to handle, is instead of embedding the JavaScript right into a function right into the UX, put it into a library, consolidate it all into a library, and then within the properties, use the JavaScript linked files methodology to then attach or point this UX to say, hey, make sure when you deliver it to the device, make sure that you include the library with it, because I've got some JavaScript functions I'll probably be calling on that. And that, I hope, answers the question to our loyal viewer reader who sent that in. Again, we want to say thank you to everybody who takes the time to go ahead and provide that for us. It gives us a lot of good information. What I would like to do now is open it up for questions either on what I've already demonstrated or questions that you have that we haven't covered. And then at the end, we'll give a little recap. We're going to be looking at something very interesting next week, and then we'll go from there. And as always, if you want to, you can send your questions to guides@alphasoftware.com. That's GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. And Dave will be monitoring that, working with me to make sure that we can get them answered as soon and as easily as possible. So with that, Dave, over to you.
All right. Well, just looking back at something that you showed earlier on, having to do with encryption and decryption, the question is, could you illustrate how to decrypt the Social Security number on a report instead of in a UX?
Oh, okay. Yes, that's a great question. So I'm going to go ahead and go in here, and I'm going to go to reports. And I'm going to create a new report just for this purposes here. So I'm in the alpha, I'm at the web security or web projects control panel. I've clicked on reports here. I'm going to create a new report. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a SQL data source because I'm reporting off my MySQL database or whatever database you happen to choose. Okay. In this case, I'm going to go to employees, and they don't have a Social Security number in there. Now I'll just pick one of them to show what it is. And then, so what I've done is I've selected which connection string, in this case a connection to an Access database. I've selected which the SQL statement. I could go ahead and build that out with a full SQL statement there, but I'm going to make it simple. I'm just selecting the information from employees. And now once I've done that, I have my report, and I can put in here this information and show you what it is. Okay, so this is showing that data, and then this is the quick report. If I want to, I can open this in our full-blown report editor and then off to the races here. But there's a really powerful tool called calculated fields. And so in here I can create, and I can go my SSN, or let's say SSN decrypted is equal to decrypt string, and then I'm going to refer to a field. Let's just say the hire date was decrypted. So I'm just putting in, that would normally say SSN. So what's going to happen is when this report runs, it's going to, for every record that it brings back, it runs this calculated field, and I taken and decrypted that. Now, of course, if I used a password, make sure to use the same password. And now this SSN decrypted in here. So let's go ahead and go back to our columns. You'll notice it now shows up as a column. So I can add that to a column. And in here, obviously it makes no sense because it's not encrypted, so it's not going to show up here. But if it were decrypted data or encrypted data, this function will fire on every row and then treat it as a separate column that we can include in there. So excellent question. Basically, you can use the calculated fields function in our reports to add a calculated field, which would be the decryption, and then you could add that to the report. Excellent question.
Great. Now, you had mentioned before about not storing credit card numbers, which is a great idea, but that certain payment processors allow you to use tokens. Someone was wondering if you could sort of expand on, maybe not demonstrate it, but just sort of talk about how that might work.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's becoming a standard way. Obviously, with every day there's a discussion of privacy and security, and actually the kind of scary thing is that the credit card companies are holding people more and more liable for data breaches and things like that. So it's getting to the point where you kind of to the big boys to manage and protect that data. And so the method it works is that if you look at a lot of the modern credit card processors, what they do is this, is that you'll have a form where you will collect it. So I'll have a similar form that I built here where the person puts in their, and I'm going to go ahead and add these fields just so we'll see here so you can see what it kind of looks like. So I put in, let's say, CC number, month, year, and CVV code. So you would put this on your form here. Now what you do, you would not data link that, is what you would do is all of these third-party providers, by the way, very important is Alpha already has Stripe enclosed, so check out Stripe as one of them because Alpha already has an integration included in our capabilities. But that said, the idea is that you collect the information on the screen, and then when you do the server-side after dialog validate, what you would do is you'd run a web API call to your provider, whoever that happens to be. You hand them the information, the CC number, the month, the year, and the CVV. That will be an HTTPS call, so it will be a secure call. So the data will be encrypted before it gets sent over there. So as it travels to the credit card processor, it's encrypted. They will then take that information, they will store it, validate it, and then store it, and then they return back to you a token field. And that token field, each one is a little different, is basically just a unique ID now that you can store that doesn't include any information in terms of credit card number, month, year, etc., but allows you to say this person is associated with this token. So then when you want to actually run the transaction, you send them the person and the token and say it's, I'm using this token to run a transaction, and then they'll go ahead and in their system take that token, figure out what the credit card number, etc. is, run the transaction, and then return back to you the result of your transaction. And all of them have moved this direction because of obviously they don't want everybody having these credit card numbers sitting down on all these databases. I mean, people don't want to have that happen. And more important for you as a developer, it's very important that you obviously protect your client's data, and this is one of the best ways to do it. And the great thing about it is that if you go with this method, then the credit card processing company is responsible for the security from the standpoint of protecting the person's credit card number, their month, their year, their CVV, and it's a very secure methodology. I mean, you look at basically how Apple Pay works, they've gone the same direction. They're actually super hardcore. But, and even like if you notice now, when you actually take your credit card number, what happens is when you plug it in now with your chip on there, the system doesn't actually send the credit card number to the processor. Basically, they send a secret code, and then a one-time transaction token is sent back to the machine that allows the person you're at the store to collect their money, but there's never a record of the person's credit card number ever going on the machine or in the data center for that store. So this is kind of a modern thing. The tricky part of it, just to let you know, is that each processor has their own sort of web API, although they provide a lot of documentation towards it. I think what's going to help us is more and more people are providing node modules to allow you to connect to these people, and we could start looking at using Node since it's built into Alpha to handle these kind of complex situations. You know, Node's pretty easy to use. What we do is right function that will then to the web API and get that token back and save that token. Very handy, very useful. WorldPay, by the way, is another area you should look into. Alpha already has existing WorldPay integrations along with Stripe integrations, and as part of that integration, one of the commands is there. And in fact, God, where's that? Hold on a second here. Let's see if I can send that out to everybody if they're interested in looking at that. Here it is. Okay, copy, go back here. Love Evernote, love Evernote. Okay, so I'm going to send this out to everybody. If you click on that link, that is the full documentation information about Alpha's integration with the WorldPay, and in there you'll actually find they have the ability for you to submit the data and then save a token. And so it's kind of already pre-done. Thank you, Bob Moore, for doing the work on this, along with Max Hammond and some other people who did all the integration work on that. But check that out. It's a nice off-the-shelf solution that's ready to go. Obviously, you have to use WorldPay when you do your transactions. The other one you may want to look into is Stripe. We have an integration built into Alpha for Stripe, and so those would be my two go-to ones that are available that you should check out. Obviously, PayPal is very popular. I've done some integrations with PayPal, and I don't know if there's really, it hasn't been worked on a lot. It's mainly WorldPay and Stripe are the ones you should check into. So hopefully that gave a little bit more flavor for how this all works.
Excellent. So back to a couple more encryption questions, a rather quick
one. Good. It was a good subject.
It's a great subject. So
yeah, thank you to the guy for asking.
That's right. When it comes to the encryption and decryption that you've shown so far, is it required that you use SSL to communicate between the client and the server to make that work, or is it just a good idea, or can you do it at all?
It's a good idea. I would definitely look at using SSL for any of your implementations, mainly because SSL kind of takes care of that traffic between the mobile device and the server in terms of keeping that secure, and also it's a trust level. People, when they see HTTPS, are a little bit more confident. These functions don't require SSL to work, but you'll notice that these functions are operating on the server. So when the actual form gets sent out to the mobile platform, if you've already decrypted the social security number, unless it's an SSL transaction, you're sending basically a social security number over the wire. So I would agree with the person's assessment that the combination of using this decryption and encryption methodology with SSL is the best of both worlds, and you'll have the highest secure environment that's available and highly recommended. And SSL, we just had a very important release update on that. They've been finding some vulnerabilities in SSL recently, so we've been following those closely, and our team has been updating our aspects to it. But SSL is a part of the Alpha application server. It's designed to use it. So and you have to pay a little bit to get an SSL certificate, but I highly recommend investing in the time and effort to make your system SSL compliant, given the fact that your client, whoever you're deploying for, will support it. But it really provides a very safe and comfortable environment for people to use and protects you.
Great. Someone asked whether or not the new documentation system is up and running, and the answer to that is it is not yet ready. I am still working on it with a team of other people. It should come out at the same time that we release Alpha Anywhere version 4, which is slated, if everything goes right, for next week. So hopefully...
No way! Seriously?
That's sort of, we're looking towards that. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe this is inside information.
Oh, okay.
Right,
everybody's sworn to secrecy.
Everyone's sworn to secrecy, but that's kind of, that's the word on the street.
And this portion will not show up in the actual, when we post this to the website, this will not show up. You'll hear this or some kind of technical difficulty screen. That's exciting. Man, that's great. In fact, I've been watching, like, one of the things we want to talk about next week is that in the latest pre-release, they released the new CSS designer, which is going to be the next generation, which uses SAS and other new technologies. Really exciting stuff. Very cool.
SAS is cool. We should definitely do a segment on that. It really lets you do some amazing
stuff. In fact, we probably should have like an expert on SAS do that, since I'm not an expert. But really cool demo. And actually, if you go back, I believe Selwyn at DevCon 2015 did do a quick demonstration of the plan for the new, talked a bit about SAS and stuff. So if you're overeager and you can't wait, go ahead and check the DevCon 2015 videos. I believe there's a demonstration there. But definitely, that's one of the key things I see, is that improving the look and feel of our apps, that whole new, designer along with SAS and stuff. We're going to be diving into that for everybody so they're aware of how that stuff works, okay?
Another question regarding encryption and decryption. The example that you showed was for UX. Can you do encryption and decryption with a grid? Is it the same? Is it a little different?
It's pretty similar. Basically, if I go ahead and open up a grid, where's the grid component? Where you would look is that you would go into the server-side events, and then you have hooks where you can say, can update record. So this is when you're going to update the record. This is where you would put in your encryption, decryption, similar functions. This is all XBasic. And then I think it's on before, where is it? On detail view render, no, that's not it. It's on one of these. You can, I know definitely when you're going to save it, it's the can update or can insert. These two functions fire before you actually store the data in there. I forget which one is on. It's one of these. I'd have to do a little research. Yeah, but in here is a. Yeah, and so you can grab the data before it's displayed, decrypt it, and set it, and so that when it actually shows on the grid, you have the right information. So that's similar concept. You're basically kind of capturing certain moments, doing the encryption and decryption so that the user never knows it, but they see the result, but behind the scenes you're handling for it.
So follow-up question, and that is, can you encrypt and decrypt on the client side?
Interesting. I don't know, and I would have to suggest you would look at looking at a JavaScript encryption decryption library and using that. So the answer is most likely yes, but most likely it would require a third-party JavaScript library, which, by the way, kind of dovetails into what I talked about also. You would add that library in there and make it available, and then you could fire that JavaScript, say, before you do the, like, what you would do is, let's say I've got this UX and I have this submit button. Well, if we look at the action JavaScript right here, it's just doing a dialog submit. So you would do in here, you'd say, fire off my encryption logic to change the data, then submit. So there'd have to be some kind of third-party library used to do encryption, decryption, and then you'd fire off the submit, and you've already kind of done the job. And then as far as when you load it, there are, if we look at client-side events, you can see there's a whole series of client-side events where you can run JavaScript here, and maybe it's after record navigate or on render complete maybe. See, this is when the UX is rendered. You have to play with that, but you could capture the event and run that same decryption client-side so that these are client-side events. So once the render is complete on the mobile device, you could fire off a little piece of JavaScript that then performs whatever decryption method you would like to do. So that's the strategy and the approach I would take towards implementing that on the client side.
Excellent. Here's one that might take too long to get to in the 10 minutes that we have, but I'll ask it anyway, and we can always come back to it. This one has to do with JSON and basically arrays of JSON. So they have an array of JSON, which within that array of JSON data is another array of JSON data. In other words, embedded JSON,
nested.
Hierarchical, nested. Thank you.
Yeah.
How does Alpha Anywhere deal with that? Do we have functions or something like that to handle it, or?
Well, I think the most powerful feature I see out there is there's a function, and it is called Alpha 5 JSON parse. Okay, so we have this function called JSON parse, and what that allows you to do is that it takes JSON and creates what's called a pointer variable. So it turns it into a pointer array. So the cool thing about that is that, for instance, here, this is my JSON data right here. You'll notice it's got an open bracket, close bracket, then you have name, date of birth, etc. Then what I can do is I can take that JSON text and I can use this JSON part, and you'll notice it turns it into what's called a pointer variable, where I could say p.name, p.date of birth, p.title. And it's smart enough to handle nested solutions, so you can actually have a nested pointer structure. So it's just a quick and dirty, it's just I would investigate using the JSON pointer our JSON parse function. By the way, there's a JSON generate where what you can do is you can take a pointer variable, and you'll notice how this is working. I'm creating a pointer variable, then I'm saying generate that JSON using that pointer variable. That's using the JSON generate. So they're kind of two peas in the pod, similar to encrypt decrypt. So play with that. What I would do is I would create a nested, I would grab some of this, turn it into a pointer variable, and then inspect that pointer variable using the alpha, just using a script. You could see how it's structured. And the neat thing about a pointer variable is that it's an array. So all the array functions are available. So you can get things like the count of a subarray, so it can have nested capabilities within that. So yeah, it gets a little tricky, but the reality is if you're going to programmatically work with it, it handles it fine. Now the other thing I like to point to is that if I go back into my alpha development environment and I go to my JSON, JSON data template tester, it's on the tools menu here. Well, in here you have a playground for doing things with JSON and doing what's called JSON templating, which is where you're going to take JSON and maybe display it on the screen. So you'll notice in here I have a nested situation where I have a top level, and then I have down below the array built into this top level. And so then you can play with that. So check out the template tester. What's nice I like about it is that you can kind of play with it. You can see it. There's actually some example like complex objects. You can also look at nested arrays of objects are in here. So Alpha does encompass and can handle nested JSON data. In fact, it has to be able to support our disconnected operation with lists. But if you want to learn more about it, use the template tester or start playing with what's called the JSON parse, JSON generate functions, which from a programmatic level in Nix Basic will allow you to do stuff.
Great. We have someone else, we get this question asked from time to time, asking about, does Alpha Anywhere work with Bootstrap? Can it be integrated?
And the answer is yes, Alpha does work with Bootstrap. There's actually a third party has generated a pre-made Bootstrap integration. It's called, let's see, Alpha Bootstrap Is that one? Is it? No, maybe not. No, that's not it. There's a third party who's done that. Let's see. I have to find that real quick. The tricky part of this Bootstrap is that it's actually built on jQuery. So therefore, you are, in order for you to use Bootstrap, you need to convert the libraries so that they work well with Alpha's libraries. And there's actually a really good discussion on there's actually a tool that Selwyn built that allows you to convert third-party jQuery libraries like Bootstrap into libraries that work well with Alpha. And it's kind of, why don't we plan on talking about that next week, since we're going to talk about CSS.
Yep.
I'll dig that information out and have that available, and we can do a little bit more justice to it than trying to rush it in the next few minutes here, because it is an important question and people have a question, and I want to spend a little bit more than a few minutes talking about it. But the answer is yes. The caveat is that you have to process the JavaScript libraries that come with Bootstrap into a format that Alpha likes and can work with, and more importantly is that there's a tool that's available that will do that for you, and you can use a command line inside XBasic to load the library, and it will make a copy of that library, edit it, make it clean, and then give it back to you so you can include it in your products. And I've done it myself. It's just a little work that needs to be done, but it works really well, and then all the JavaScript works great. Like, in fact, I can show you real quick. It's just a preview for next week. Okay, let me go ahead and open up, cancel. I think it's this one right here. Sorry, be ready to go in a moment. So I have a very simple Bootstrap, and I can go actually into CSS and shows it here, but I can go here and I can say, let me see if I can show this real quick, just to whet people's appetite. Okay. Okay, so it's a third-party. It's called. It's free. It's called Bootstrap Admin, SB Admin v2.0. If you just do a Google search for that, and you'll notice in here I've got some JavaScript or some Bootstrap stuff. You get these menus right here, and they're nice, using nice, colorful things. Check out this menu here, a nice-looking Bootstrap menu. So this is a Bootstrap, a very simple theme. And then you'll notice something running right here. In here, we have a grid, an Alpha grid. So basically, I have a page in here that's being displayed and inside the grid. Now, what you'll see if you were to take this third-party library and include it in one of it, you would see weird things happen. Like, for instance, these would be forced open. They wouldn't work. And the reason behind that is that Alpha has a set of JavaScript libraries that it's using to display this, and then Bootstrap has their JavaScript libraries. So what I needed to do was convert Bootstrap libraries, then I included it with my project, and now they play peacefully together. They don't step on each other. So we'll go in a little bit more detail next week, but as you can see, it's really cool. And again, this is a very simple, but this is an Alpha solution. It's running a UX on an A5W page. It's got, a grid on here that I can use, and all my functions, if I had more, would be available. And it's got all the nice looking, like for instance, that's not going to work there, but it's got all the nice looking drop-down menus, etc. So we play well with Bootstrap, but there is that caveat, and we'll go into a little bit more detail next week on that. But that's a great question. We're getting a lot more of that, and we want to make sure people create beautiful solutions, so we can help you out on that.
Great. And someone did actually find the correct URL that you were looking for. It is Alpha
Oh, good. Thank you.
Bootstrap. So if you're looking for it, it's in the chat window. So go ahead.
And that the gentleman's already gone through. He's integrated with the Tab UI. He has sample pages. That's actually your quick and dirtiest, because you just buy it and start working with it.
Yep.
If you want to use another Bootstrap theme, then you just have to go through that conversion process, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so I want to thank you, Dion, for presenting. Thank you, everyone who attended and asked questions. This is a good session we enjoy doing every week. So if you do have questions in the meantime, please send them to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. And you'll be able to find a video of this and other Q&A demo recordings at videos.alphasoftware.com. So until next week, I want to thank you very much, and I hope to see you at a future webinar. Take care, and goodbye.